The original 1982 Blade Runner defined the look of the cinematic future. It gave us a Los Angeles choking on its own visual noise, a hyper-dense canyon of neon advertisements, acid rain, and decaying skyscrapers. 35 years later, Blade Runner 2049 presented a radically different vision of ruin. The neon clutter has been swept away, replaced by a severe landscape of massive, silent slabs of gray concrete. This shift was a deliberate choice by director Denis Villeneuve and cinematographer Roger Deakins. They explicitly modeled the world of 2049 on the severe concrete architecture that emerged in London during the 1950s. Modeling a corporate hellscape on these specific structures creates a sharp irony. The original architects of these severe forms intended for the concrete to liberate the common person, not entomb them. That style is known as brutalism, and despite its intimidating name, the movement was rooted in radical socialist ideals. Post-war architects built structures like London's Barbican estate to provide progressive welfare housing and communal spaces for the masses. The term comes from the French béton brut, meaning raw concrete. This was an architecture of honesty, stripping away the frivolous designs of the bourgeois past to focus on the raw structural truth of the building. Blade Runner 2049 subverts this progressive history. It takes this exact aesthetic and uses it to house Nyander Wallace, a shadowy monopolist who controls the global food supply and manufactures a slave class of synthetic humans. By placing a corporate dictator inside walls built for the public good, the film presents a deliberate perversion of a style originally intended to serve humanity. To understand how we arrived at Wallace's monoliths, we have to look back at the economic failure of the first film. Designer Sid Mead built the 1982 world around retrofitting, the practice of bolting new technology onto crumbling buildings because the consumer economy had broken down. This collapse pushed the working class into street-level access corridors. These became hyper-congested spaces where people camped directly beneath massive, abandoned city machines. Even in this decay, the world was a culturally rich mashup. Rick Deckard's apartment was a tunnel of detailed concrete blocks, cast from the actual walls of Frank Lloyd Wright's Ennis Brown house. This diagram shows the spatial divide of that era. Below, the chaotic horizontal grid of the street. Above, the isolated, clean pyramids of the Tyrell Corporation, hovering far beyond the reach of the city's residents. The capitalism of 1982 was a claustrophobic mess, but its architecture forced physical human interaction. Even at its most oppressive, the city remained undeniably lived in. In the 30 years leading up to 2049, total ecological collapse has eradicated tactile nature. Humanity has been driven entirely indoors or off-world, leaving the planet a barren shell. This return to concrete ignores the core philosophy of brutalist pioneers Allison and Peter Smithson. They argued that bare concrete structures were merely canvases waiting to be dressed by the art of inhabitation. 2049 strips away this human dressing. Families and community presence have been erased, replaced by ambient holographic advertisements that fight for the attention of the isolated consumer. This massive, empty scale takes a psychological toll. Characters are forced to seek out synthetic snow or virtual nature just to maintain a baseline of emotional stability in an environment that offers no human warmth. In the world of 2049, the art of inhabitation has vanished. The buildings are draped in the digital glare of corporate white noise rather than the traces of human life. As cultural theorist Walter Benjamin famously observed, to dwell is to leave traces. The LAPD headquarters and Wallace's domains actively prevent this. They use vast expanses of concrete and plastic to scrub out any trace of human existence or inner life, ensuring the architecture remains as impersonal as the machines that built it. This aesthetic follows a cold economic logic. Massive, imposing concrete structures are relatively cheap to construct, yet they exert maximum psychological dominance over the populace. Removing the core social provisions, the presence of families, the plain children, and the mutual care, strips the progressive ideology out of the concrete entirely. Brutalism without people is a hollow simulation. It is a hijacked style used by a monopoly to signify power rather than community. This vision of the future is a product of capitalist realism. the malaise suggesting it is now easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. While technology and ecological disaster advance rapidly, the free market economic system remains locked in permanent stagnation. And using 1950s architecture to depict the 2040s highlights a specific fatigue in set design. Recycling our grandparents' aesthetics reflects our inability to visualize a future beyond the past. The massive concrete walls of 2049 ultimately signal a loss of the communal imagination. We have traded the ability to build futures for people for an architecture that only reinforces the permanence of the corporation.